Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the online panel discussion, the political economy of artistic autonomy. I'm VladanJeremić from Belgrade, from Serbia. I am artist and curator of this project, of this exhibition, and this panel discussion. And I will tell a few words about this program, what we have here. So we have three guests that we invited to speak about the political economy of artistic autonomy. Those are Rade Pantić, Katya Praznik, and Mike Watson. And we will hear three presentations from them in the first part. And in the second part, we can talk with them, and you can also have some questions around their presentations. First of all, I would like to explain a bit about what is this and why all this is organized. So we are here in front of the Association of Fine Artists of Serbia, in Serbian Ulus, and we are organizing now one exhibition which is actually going on and right now, and the title of the exhibition is The Antinomies of Autonomy. And this exhibition deals with the status and with the function of visual artists, of artists in today, actually, and also with a special focus on the situation of precarity and position of artists in the Serbian society right now. And but we also have some guests that we have invited to be part of this exhibition. And as you know, I will just say a few general words about the Association of the Fine Artists of Serbia. This is this is actually quite big association. It has 2,600 members, and it is 100 years old association. And it actually functions more as a kind of the artist union. And but in the same time, which is also special for this association, is that it has spaces for exhibitions, for exhibiting. So it has a big pavilion which was built in the 20s, in the 20th century, like it's also 100 years old, and it has also a gallery in the Belgrade, in the city of Belgrade. So this program, this panel discussion is actually imagined to be to address critically the questions of autonomy of art, and to see what does it mean today, what kind of political use of the autonomy of art we can have, but also what is the potential, or is there any potential of the workers organizing in that sense, and the art workers organizing, and how we can organize or unionize art workers and culture workers. So we will try to discuss those questions with our guests, and I will present first speaker, first guest. And this is Rade Pantić, who is a professor of the University of the Faculty of Media and Communication from Belgrade, where he teaches theory and ideology, theory of arts, urbanization studies, and studies of Yugoslavia. He is co-editor of the Savremene marksističke teorije umetnosti, its contemporary Marxist theory of art, which is a publication published by the Faculty of Media and Communication. And he has recently also published a book in Slovenia with his writings and essays which are related to the art and its connection to ideology and critique. So I will ask Rade to take the floor and to present his positions. He focuses on the autonomy of art and the specific economy of artistic productions. and we will see how he is defining those categories. Thank you. Rade, you are welcome.
Is it everything okay with presentation? You can see it.
Yes, we see the presentation.
Okay.
It is visible.
Okay. Thank you, Vladan, for introduction. So I will speak tonight, as Vladan said, about autonomy of art and specific economy of artistic production. Last time when I'm lectured about critique of political economy of art, it took me approximately 4 hours. So now I must compress it in 50 or 20 minutes. So I need to compress this presentation and to leave out elaboration of conceptual system which is based on Marxist critique of political economy. So I have to little bit to simplify problematics. So I will start from this commonsensical perspective. A commonsensical perspective of relationship of autonomy of art and economic sphere. By commonsensical, I mean ideological perspective. It is how we usually perceive this relationship. It's our spontaneously assumed perspective. And according to this commonsensical perspective, a field of art autonomy and economic sphere are two antagonistic spheres. You know, according to ideology of autonomy of art, which is ideology of aesthetic authenticity, economic sphere is something which is marked as inauthentic. So I will quickly pass through this opposition. I don't have time. And we all know them, you know, it's a common sense perspective. So according to this perspective, artist production is autonomous. Artist production is true art, isn't production which responds directly to consumer demand. So production in the economic sphere is heteronomous. It's answer to consumers, to their demands, their wishes. And supposedly a production of true art have non-economics motives. From this perspective comes this famous disinterestedness of art. So true art doesn't respond to market compulsion, to consumer demand. It is art for art's sake. It is not production for the market. Products of a true art production are unique products, original products. It is non-reproducible goods, and on the market we have standardized commodities and reproducible commodities. So the subject of autonomy of art, of aesthetic sphere, is homo aestheticus. It is autonomous subject who is guided by his autonomous judgmental taste. And on the other side, we have this homo economicus, economical subject, which is subsumed into the market relations. And now he is utilitarian, he is selfish, he acts in a way to maximize his gains, his profit. So according to this ideology of aesthetic authenticity, true art and true art production is something which is exempted from economical relationships. So we have this ideology which denies, in a psychoanalytical sense, that art production is economical activity, and we spontaneously assume that art autonomy is some space of freedom from capitalism. And today, when we're witnessing enlargement of art market, financialization of art, commercialization of art production, introduction of marketing techniques into the promotion of art, bank collection, etc. We spontaneously clinch to this ideology of autonomy of art. We clinch to it more closely, and we assume that autonomy of art is some kind of barrier to penetration of capitalism and market relations into the sphere of artistic production. And my hypothesis is contrary to this commonsensical perspective. I think that the autonomy of art is ideology which actually enables integration of artistic production into the mechanisms of capital accumulation. So I will start from this simple question: to which mode of production does artistic production belong? And we can say, and we are talking here about area of fine arts. And here we can say that artist is usually direct producer of his artwork, but artistic labor usually is not wage labor. So usually artist is the owner of his means of production, and artist is the owner of the final product of this process of production. So we can say that artistic labor isn't commodified. Labor power of artists isn't sold to capital. It isn't deployed directly by the capital. So, as you know, a distinctive mark of capitalism, of capitalistic mode of production, is separation of direct producers from means of production and separation from ownership of final product. So in capitalism, workers becomes labor power is the commodity which capitalists can buy on the market. So we can conclude that artist production is actually part of small commodity production. It is this antiquated mode of production which pre-exists capitalism, and is the type of small commodity production as artisan small commodity production or craft production, handicraft production. But you know, we again spontaneously assume that there is something more in arts than mere craft production. So my hypothesis is that mediation of art institutions transforms small commodity production of art into the monopolistic production sector. I don't have time now to talk about foundations of first Academy of Fine Arts in Florence, when Archduke Cosimo Medici took painting, sculpture, and architecture from guilds and made them a part of academia and part of liberal arts. So already here we have this denial that artistic production is a part of economy. But I will talk tonight about modern art institutions, and modern art institutions are based on this ideology of aesthetic autonomy of art. So how does art institution affect this transformation? Transformation of small commodity production into the monopolistic production sector. By the ideology of the autonomy of art, which singles out only certain artists and their products and gives them aesthetic recognition. So it is this aesthetic evaluation, this non-economic or seemingly not economic evaluation, aesthetic evaluation of artistic production, does produce artificial rarity of artistic products on the art market. This is what French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu called field of restricted and limited production. So if the effective demand for this product is high, the art forms that gain aesthetic recognition will have a monopoly price. What is the monopoly price? Already Adam Smith, father of political economy, gives example of some rare sorts of French wine. You know, grapes from which is this wine made is cultivated only on certain soil, only on certain patches of land, that it needs certain climate to gain that specific taste. So we have here some kind of a natural limitation in the production of that sort of wine. So it's the natural environment that limits production of that commodity. So you cannot produce more of that commodity, a bigger quantity to match a demand for that commodity. In a standard commodity, you can produce more of this commodity, and when the supply of that commodity is in equilibrium with demand, we can say that that commodity has what classical political economy calls natural price. It's a price which is correlated with productivity of labor and with cost of production. A standard commodity has price which is a cost of production plus average profit rate. And when you have this natural limitation, you then have rarity of this product on the market. And if the effective demand for this product is high, then price go up. Price of that product is much more than cost of production plus average rate of profit, and this price above the average profit is what is called a monopoly rent. So I think that artistic production, by this aesthetic evaluation, which limits this field of production, only those artists which gain recognition, aesthetic recognition by art institution can be let in this field of restricted production. So it is something of a kind of artificial barrier. You know, a barrier can be natural and can be artificial. You know, when there is a patent for production on some goods, there is legal restriction. Then you have some kind of artificial monopolization, or when you have a cartelization and something like that. So my idea is that the specialists of art institutions, namely famous curators, art theoreticians, art historians, big galleries, big exhibitions, museums, just give this aesthetic approval to a limited number of artists. And then these artists on this field of restricted production can have monopoly price for their product. So I try here to develop these categories for interpretation of artistic production. So we have here aesthetic evaluation by art institutions. And those art which have favorable reviews, which are included in famous collections, in famous museums, in famous collection, they have a long paper trail. So the longer the paper trail, the greater the aesthetic value, and we spontaneously assume the high price of artwork is a reflection of high aesthetic value. And on the other side, we have those art which is not recognized as authentic, as worth of aesthetic recognition. We might say that from this ideological perspective, it's some kind of mediocre, inauthentic art of this art, which is not yet recognized art. But when we introduce these economic categories, we may say that this aesthetic evaluation function as some kind of artificial monopolistic barriers of art institutions. It lets in only minority of artists, and majority of artists stays in this mode of production, which is small commodity production, which is highly individualized mode of production. So from totality of artistic production, only small number of artists can be let in this field of restricted production, so they can have monopoly price of their artwork. But then we can ask the question, from where comes this high demand for these monopolistic products? And it comes predominantly today from investors. What they need financial capitals. They're interested in artworks as a form of financial capital. It is demand for financial assets. And for them, artworks function same as other financial assets, as shares, as bonds and derivatives. So they need to put the money to invest in this in artwork, and they are betting that in meantime the value of this artwork will go up. And that value is dependent on this aesthetic evaluation. So these aesthetic evaluations, these non-economical or seemingly non-economical criterions, makes artworks prone to take the form of financial assets, so to function like an object of speculations for investors. So we can see already here that these non-economic criterions have real economics effects. It makes art markets a market of financial assets. And on the other side, we have the majority of artists who are excluded from our art market. And from this monopolic institution of artistic production, we have structural unemployment in the field of art. So most of artists can't support themselves, can't reproduce themselves by selling their artworks. So they must get, as we know, some additional job to support their artistic practice, maybe in a public institution, in school system, in NGO, or whatever kind of job they can take. So because of this ideology of autonomy of art, it makes them in a very precarious situation, and it makes them prone to self-exploitation. So finally, we can see that autonomy of arts also affects some specific struggle into the field of artist production. All these unrecognized artists are struggling for aesthetic authenticity for a place of aesthetic authenticity, which is imposed by them by this ideology of artistic autonomy, by this ideology of aesthetic authenticity. And this struggle and this competition is not capitalistic competition, but it is competition for entry into the field of autonomous art and to entry onto the art market. So we know these struggles. They are struggles: who is original, who is new, who is real, who is sellout, who is false, who is real underground. So effect of this ideology of aesthetic authenticity is fragmentation of artist producers. They stay in this mode of production, which is a small commodity production, and it fragments them. You know, they are struggling for a place of aesthetic authenticity, and it is very hard to start from this ideology of authenticity and to build some kind of solidarity between them. So you know, art institutions are always in need for someone who is real, who is authentic, who comes from the bottom, who is initiator of some new artistic movement, and etc. So we can conclude that this decommodification of artistic productions, the seemingly non-economical criterions of aesthetic evaluations, actually serves to some heteronomous purposes. It's a reproduction of neoliberalism and financial accumulation of capital. You know, neoliberalism is a cycle of accumulation of capital, which is based on accumulation of financial capital. Profits are much higher in the sphere of financial speculation and they are smaller in a field of production. So these seemingly non-economical criterions have real economic effects. It transforms art production and art product into products of financial market. It transforms them into financial assets. So this seemingly decommodification of artist production serve to recommodify them as financial assets. Here we have this paradox of non-market motivation of the art market. So I will conclude with a few sentences from one of my texts. Aesthetic fetishism as the ideology of institutions in the autonomous sphere of arts thus singles out specific artistic practices from the domain of petty commodity production, from small-scale commodity productions, and ensures their monopoly prices by granting them aesthetic recognitions. The autonomy of art with regard to market laws is therefore only apparent. Those artists who want to enter the monopolized sector of artistic production must meet the demand of aesthetic ideology, the demand that their artist practice should not seem economically motivated, that it should not respond directly to social demand, that it should not be perceived as an economic activity. Artistic production is therefore an economic activity that denies its being economic, and the alleged anti-market motivation of artistic labor required by aesthetic ideology is its disinterestedness, is actually the necessary prerequisite for creating the monopolized sector of artistic production and the art market, where artworks can take the form of financial capital, or as Marx calls it, fictitious capitals. So that is all for now.
Thank you very much. Before we switch to another speaker, I would like just to ask you one thing, just to clarify one issue, which I didn't find so well differentiated, probably because you don't have so much time.
Yeah.
But I would like to ask you, because I see also the big difference between you talk about the producers of arts, the artist producers, and we try here to talk about the art workers. Let's say the producers which are conscious about the exploitation in the creative sector, and also it is important to emphasize. I would say that. It's not the artists which are constructing the art brands, or which are like participating the aesthetic ideology and all this, but also like the whole system, in that sense, the whole institution of art.
Yeah.
I would say, like, if you agree, I don't know, like that those are also galleries, collectioners, and so on. Like, they are much more important for this circle than the art producers, just simple art producers.
Yes, I mentioned them. I talked about curators, art critics, big museums, big collectors, big galleries, big exhibitions, etc. So you didn't heard me that.
Yes, I heard that, but you didn't. You don't frame them as the institution of art, because
they
yes.
are part of art institutions. Yeah, these are art institutions. They're specialists for art institutions.
Okay.
Curators, theoreticians, and you have an artist, which are some kind of entrepreneurs.
Thank you. I see. Okay. We have one question in the chat, or comment by Bill Rosberry, who says, neither art nor artists are autonomous to the parameters of culture in general. Therefore, what we seek is the liberation of indigenous culture from the bond of capitalism. Without a comprehensive definition of socialist culture, any discussion of art is pointless.
Yeah. I have the answer just a little bit. To go back. The answer is here, if artists stay in this ideology of aesthetic authenticity, they are fighting each other for this place of which is the place of entry onto the art market. So they have to build some kind of new ideology, which will be this factor of cohesion between them, and then they can try to refunction art institutions, to build some other kind of ideology, and then have some new criterions for socialist art. And they have to build some kind of alternative economy for art, and it's not easy job. They must then articulate their practice with some political movements and etc.
Yeah, thank you. So I think this was quite good comment. Thank you also to Bill Rosberry and also to Rade Pantić. It is nice to continue straightforward with Katya Praznik. She was here, I think, in June in Belgrade, and she was participating some of the Association of Fine Artists of Serbia events, and she got to know a bit about what is going on in the association and what is the situation in Serbia and so on. But first, before we start with her talk, I will present her shortly. She is actually professor of in the arts management program in the Department of Media Study at University of Buffalo, where she teaches courses related to the political economy of the arts, cultural policy, and research in the field of arts management. And her recent book is Artwork, Invisible Labor, and the Legacy of Yugoslav Socialism, which was published by University of Toronto Press this year. And Paradoksne plaćenega umetničkega dela, Autonomija umetnosti, avangarda in kulturna politika na prethodu v post-socializem. It is in Slovenian, which was in Slovene, which was published by Založba Sofia in 2016. So Katya, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being with us this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much for your introduction. I'm just going to set the time so I don't talk too long. But I wanted to start from another angle to address the problem that I think Rade did a very nice expose. What is the issue of the autonomy that is, I would say, the issue that I also like to criticize and discuss with artists, and also I think because within this exhibition, this is the key topic. So as perhaps some of the participants are also part of this discussion tonight, what I did before we had this conversation today, I did a brief little survey and tried to reach out to as many artists as possible that are participating in the exhibition and ask them, because we have this conversation, if they can tell me what were their working conditions in the exhibition, and so on and so on. And unsurprisingly, most of them responded that they did not receive any exhibition fee, and some of them participated through the concourse or
do you hear who lost whom? Katya, we lost you a bit. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you have been. You said that most of the participants did not receive any artist fee, and as I mean, most of the all of the artists participating in the exhibitions organized by the Association of the Fine Arts don't receive fee, and this is something which is like interesting to discuss. So you can continue.
Okay, so I'm sorry for the interruption. My internet is poor. Anyhow, so the exhibition is not special in that respect. So it's just another case of an exhibition where artists are not paid. Currently or recently, we have another example of such an exhibition that you may be familiar with that is taking place in Kunsten Museum in Denmark, where only one artist actually decided to take the money and run. When he was commissioned to reinstall one of his artworks, he decided that instead of displaying the money bills that were supposed to be in the painting, he actually took the money and sent to the museum the empty canvases, and he explained this partially and as a comment on the working conditions of artists. And so I want to start here because I think that these stories and this practice that has become so normalized is precisely a consequence of these ideas of autonomy, which Rade, I think, explained really in very detailed way. So the problem of this autonomy is that what are artists autonomous from, and what are the benefits of this autonomy? I always say that I'm not so much interested in theory, but I'm really interested in how we can change the practice if we discuss the autonomy as something that is an ideal in the art world. So autonomy, on the one hand, as Rade explained, separates artistic practice from economy, or presumably, right? It's an ideology. Autonomy is an ideology, and as every good ideology, it hides the relationships of production. And so, artistic labor is considered to be the realm of human labor that is separate from these matters of economy, or even, as Rade also pointed out, as if they are antagonistic. And of course, this is a huge issue, because the consequence of this kind of thinking is that artists don't get paid. And furthermore, what is also a consequence of artistic autonomy, or the ideas of artistic autonomy, is that artistic labor is not perceived as a form of labor. So it is invisible, it is as a form of labor, and it is considered to be creativity, and so on and so on. And so numerous scholars have pointed out many times that the largest subsidy for the arts comes from the unpaid labor of artists. And like we said, the meeting in the exhibition in the framework of which we are meeting today is just another case in point. So, and I think that this paradox of art, which is related on the one hand to the fact that labor is not perceived as labor, and thus artists are not understood, or they don't wish to understand themselves as workers. And then on the other hand, that we have a problem with how, what kind of economic relations they are part of, right? If the ideology of autonomy keeps maintaining this mystification of this labor and of this sphere. And so I think that this creative work is therefore precisely devaluated, because if we don't want to understand it as labor, and if we don't want to understand artists as workers, and we want to understand them as something that is exceptional, that is authentic, and so on and so on, it makes the labor invisible, and the autonomy just emphasizes this position. And the autonomy, of course, is not just simply an ideology, but it's also a structural problem, because what it also does is that we cannot discuss the problem of working conditions in the arts as a form of exploitation. So again, if I come back to this, my mini survey that I did today with the participants of this exhibition, right, they take it as a normal way of how things are. You are part of an exhibition and you don't get paid, and that's normal, right? I mean, individually, artists would be critical of that and would complain, but the question then becomes why and how to actually go beyond these ideas in order to be able to organize and to be able to change this practice, right? Wouldn't it be interesting to think about an exhibition that is organized by an association of artists, right, which has such a long history, where the exhibition itself, or the practice that and the way the exhibition was organized, would set a different kind of tone, rather than to reproduce the same type of problems, right? While at the same time, we want to talk about the labor conditions, right? So in that sense, I think the ideas and the discourse of autonomy are misguided, precisely because they're separated from the economy. So if we don't want to think about the autonomy in relation to the economy, then I think that this is a dead end. And this is what actually enables us in the art world to think about artists as workers, to organize, and to start thinking about the economic relations, right? And because if we want to separate art and subsistence in the interest of saying that we are more autonomous as critical artists, as intervening in and commenting on the reality, this in fact really produces false dichotomies, right? We have creative work and we have paid work. If you get paid for your work, you are not autonomous, and so on and so on. So this is why art is such an exploitative practice. And of course, numerous unpaid artists are a great example. Another one, for instance, right? It's also that because of that, because this is so normalized, there is also a question of solidarity, is question of connecting people, because everyone competes with one another, right? Everyone is agreeing to these conditions, and that becomes a problem, because then we can't again discuss economic relations. We can discuss artistic labor as a form of labor that is, and a form of labor that is being exploited by the entire system. And this autonomy actually really prevents us to discuss this. So rather than to acknowledge that autonomy and this antagonistic relation of autonomy to economy is a huge problem, and we should either redefine autonomy, or we should define the economic relations in which artists find themselves. And that's why I keep saying that if we discuss art as a form of labor, and if we discuss artists as workers, this is crucial. And it doesn't take away anything from artists' critical points of view, from their, I would say, from the way they work, from whatever they do and how particular their work is. But what it does do, it helps them to, let's say, create a union, to not discuss only payment, right? Because the problem of art is not just that the labor is unpaid, but that the labor, we can't even talk about working conditions, right? So if we want to form a union, we would not just negotiate how artists should be paid and what is the value of their labor, but also what the working conditions should be. And this is where I think that the union and workers' discourse helps us, but I really think that it doesn't help us to discuss autonomy as something that is separate from economy, because it makes the work that we do, the practice that we do, somehow private, as if right, doing art is not in fact a public activity, and it is part of a larger social system, and it's part of certain and particular and very problematic power and economic relations. And so that's why I think that in order to somehow get away from this depoliticizing and paralyzing effect of autonomy, we should abandon talking about autonomy in this particular sense. So I'll leave it at that for now, and then we can perhaps discuss furthermore during tonight's discussion how and what we can do about this.
So thank you very much, and I think this intervention, what you did, was very good, and there are like a lot of efforts to change the way of the Artists Association works, and we have inherited some practices from the previous let's say board and previous colleagues who have run the association, and some of the practices can be changed very slowly, step by step. Maybe somebody from the board and from the artistic council can talk more about this. But what I can say that right now we have, the association has published an announcement that application fee for exhibiting in the main gallery in the center of the city is now cancelled. So it was like quite high exhibition fee, and the association decided to cancel this fee, but only for the members of association. So that means that even for the exhibition which you have been addressed and I was curating, that all people who haven't been who are not members of the association had to pay application fee. It is symbolic, and this is some kind of measure that protects basically the most of the artist union members, but you have to take into account that most of the artists in Serbia are actually member of this association. So it is actually protecting the branch. And and those practices have been established long ago, and we now think, what does it mean to change it and how to change it? And I think this panel and this exhibition is also part of it. And what I could add, and maybe you can, Katya, also like comment on this, is that we need to think when we talk about the art labor. I always think it is interesting to also try to find out in which art or institutions of art this takes place. Like, do we do it in some small museum which is like on the brink of extinction in the middle of Bulgaria, or I don't know, like Albania, or we are doing it in relation to Guggenheim or MoMA, you know? I think we need different criteria for different circumstances. Because I think that artists even can work without artist fee if there is a certain struggle going on and they want to join. So this is my personal opinion. Although I support that all artwork should be, also that artists as workers should be paid for their work. Bill Roseberry says, Katya, to the point, yes. And we have one comment of Željko Blače before I give another round to Katya. Željko Blače says, does it help to rephrase and talk in plural of autonomies, not as a single and absolute, as Rade and Katya addressed ideology of autonomy of art, but spectrum of relations as capacities to at least temporarily and dynamically control different levels of actual non-autonomies. And Sibylle Hofter says, exhibition fee for externals keeps artists in the association. This is more a question. Artists who are a member of the association and who pay association fee, they don't pay fee for exhibiting in the premises of art association. Just to answer briefly is to Sibylle Hofter. Katya, please.
So yeah, I wanted to say, right, really, this is that when we discuss the problem of payment, and especially in the visual arts, it's really right. This is a very common practice, and so I think that it is really important that when we are in the position to change things, when we are organizing things, that we try to change them, that we try to do them differently. So I think that all the efforts that, especially all different working groups related to working conditions within ULUS are doing a very important work. I would not want to be misunderstood because I'm critical of certain aspects, and also I want to say that this is not just about this particular show, like Vladan said perhaps earlier before when we started, that this is a general issue. I mentioned Jens Hanning, that artist who exhibited with 25, I would say, other artists in this Kunsten show in Denmark. And so I also asked those artists, are they going to do any kind of action? Are they going to support that artist? There was no solidarity among them so far. Nobody responded, nobody said anything. So this is one person in the exhibition talking about labor and labor issues and non-payment and so on. And immediately, when you look at the general public perception, you see that this is perceived as a marketing hoax. Again, nobody's talking about labor. So I think that it's really on us in the field to start changing that. And I agree that the scales are different, and that because of this ideas of autonomy, which are also, I think, part of the problem of why certain institutions and art in general is not funded well. Because if we would take a labor perspective to the arts, and if every museum director would start calculating their budgets by paying actual fees, exhibition fees to begin with, and then thinking about production costs for, let's say, in the visual arts, these budgets would be redistributed, would be different. And I think that it is a question of scale and how much money museums have, but I think it's also a matter of culture. And that I think that no matter what we do and how low we are and what a small museum we are, we can make an effort. and we can talk about these things openly. And I think that that's something that is very important, to start the conversation, to open this discourse and to not ignore it and to not normalize these kind of practices. So maybe that. And the question about the autonomies. I mean, I don't want to get too theoretical, but in fact, I think that we are dealing with two types of autonomy when we talk about the autonomy of art. One is on the structural level, which means that art is perceived as an autonomous social sphere, which enables it to be a professional sphere where people get particular type of education, where we have institutions, where we have all sorts of professions that are part of the so-called art world, or whatever we want to call it, right? So this is as an autonomous social sphere. And if we are then taking a Marxist approach, capitalism causes that social spheres are perceived as autonomous, as if they are autonomous, but the economic logic is underpinning them one way or the other. And then the other thing is this ideology of autonomy, which is related especially to the aesthetic discourses, to, for instance, I always use Kant, but there were more people than Kant who established the aesthetic discourse, and part of that aesthetic discourse is this autonomy, which defines artistic labor as something which is divorced or separated from economic issues, or is antagonistic to capitalism, and so on and so on, which is of course problematic because it's not true. Yeah, I'm not sure, perhaps we could talk about different kinds of autonomies and define them, but I think that the structural and ideological aspects of autonomy of art, which prevent us to discuss the economic relations, are extremely problematic. So, you know, I'm all for talking about autonomy, but I always say, look, you are not really autonomous if you cannot define yourself in economic relations, if we live in capitalism. So for that reason, our autonomy is going to be greater, and Rade also pointed importantly out, is going to be greater if we can define our economic conditions, relations, and what we want. So it is extremely important to not divorce these two things, that we don't think about the autonomy in separation from the economy. I'll stop.
Yes, don't think autonomy is separated from the economy, but Theodor Adorno was thinking that there is some potential in autonomy. Maybe there is something there. Maybe we can maybe switch to another speaker who can tell us something which is maybe close to this point. And I will present now Mike Watson. He's our third and the last speaker, and he's art and media theorist, critic, and curator who holds a PhD in philosophy from the Goldsmiths College. He curated 55th and 56th Venice Biennale events, and as well as the Manifesto 12 in Palermo. And he has written regularly for the magazines as, for example, Jacobin, Radical Philosophy, Art Review, and Art Forum. And his last book, I will mention his last book. His last book is The Memeing of Mark Fisher, How the Frankfurt School Foresaw Capitalist Realism and What to Do About It. So Mike, hello, and we are happy to see you here.
Hi, yeah, hi, thank you. Had you finished? Yeah.
Yes, I finished.
Okay, yeah. Are you seeing my screen? Can you see my screen share?
I hope we see your screen share. Yes. Memes, algorithms, and artistic.
Yeah, okay, you're now seeing this. Yeah. Okay, well, I could speak about Adorno. I don't really know now what I'm going to say, because they were really interesting talks, more than I thought they would be. Sorry, but I mean, I didn't expect to have such politicized talks about real conditions in art spaces and the problems facing artists. So that's kind of making me wonder what I should really say. But just one comment is that I think both Rade and Katya were driving towards the need to address capitalism before we can have autonomy. So this kind of sense that I think, I don't want to like put words in Katya's mouth, but I think Rade certainly pointed to this. We need full socialism first. But I think the problem there is that we just can't have socialism. And so we're in this kind of bind, and this is what Adorno was dealing with. So to come to Vladan, thinking that I might mention Adorno, well, that did come to mind because Adorno, Benjamin, Marcuse, etc., the Frankfurt School were really dealing with the very real sense that there were no alternatives to capitalism, and the alternatives that had been tried, i.e. fascism and Soviet communism, weren't delivering really better conditions. But they did point out that capitalism, the American kind of version, because Adorno and Marcuse spent time in America as exiles, they did point out actually this was really as bad as fascism and communism in many ways. So, you know, they weren't saying that, you know, these kind of isms were a trap and were somehow worse than capitalism. They're just saying that it was all bad, and that there seemed to be no way out of these basically controlling systems that arise from faults in human thinking. So for Adorno, we tend to control. So he calls it identity thinking. So the human tends to try to control their surroundings and identify and categorize and give numbers and measurements to things. And this has led us to kind of categorize everything, even ourselves. So we've all become trapped in this kind of numbers game, i.e. capitalism, finance capitalism. And there really isn't by now a way out. So, you know, where Adorno goes towards the artwork, the abstract artwork, is he basically thinks that the only way to get around the trap of everything being categorized is to express through art something that is uncategorizable, i.e., you know, an abstract work, a work that one can't look at and say, this is a tree, this is a person, this is, you know, whatever. So the point being, it's not a position of strength that we can say, let's free ourselves through art, let's claim our autonomy and just run free, you know, through the hills. You know, the point is not that. The point is that because we're completely trapped, we have to kind of go down the only path there is, and that is to portray things that don't in any way fit into this fundamentally controlling system. So there's no element of, you know, let's just have some autonomy, let's just have some freedom. Wouldn't that be nice? Adorno's not thinking that after living through World War II, after seeing Walter Benjamin die, or, you know, hearing of Walter Benjamin die, many other people he knew would have died. You know, the Frankfurt School being mostly German Jews. So, yeah, I think we need to get that the right way around. It's not really that we're trying to, you know, fantasize ways out of this and trying to put the horse before the cart, so to speak. Sorry, I'm using very English phrases. We're not, you know, we're not trying to just think, hey, isn't there some kind of clever way through it? And in our bourgeois naivety, proposing, why don't we just be autonomous? We're coming that way around because there is no other kind of avenue for freedom other than kind of inventing one. Hello. I don't think we're in any different position today. In fact, I think we're possibly in a worse position as regards the possibility of making ourselves free or realizing socialism. I think there's some positivity in the way that I mean, I'm English, so I'm going to be a bit Anglo-American now, but in the way that Corbyn and Sanders has led people to speak of socialism again in America and UK, for example. But I think, you know, those avenues are still blocked, that we can speak about these things, but they're frustratingly still distant. And we're seeing things like, of course, Ocasio-Cortez wearing her dress to the fashion ball recently, and that became a meme, and it said tax the rich. But today we're seeing Grimes, the ex-partner of Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. She was seen photographed reading the Communist Manifesto, and we're seeing memes going around the world showing that. So there's this kind of thing of like these statements and these symbols of communism, socialism, anti-capitalism being very prevalent and spreading around as memes coming down from celebrities, but that being more about the fact that those things are just impossible. Communism and socialism are impossible. That's why we're allowed to be seeing these symbols, and that's why celebrities are playing with them. So anyway, as Vladan said, I wrote this book that came out a few days ago, And it's basically about this frustrating situation we have that there really are no alternatives. And I revisit the Frankfurt School to look at how they dealt with a similar situation. So I'm dealing very much with us coming out of lockdown, hopefully. Well, hopefully we don't go back into lockdown, but I'm dealing with that, and I'm dealing with what we can learn from the Frankfurt School. And I'm also bringing in Mark Fisher, a recently deceased British theorist who had ideas similar to the Frankfurt School's ideas. So basically, Fisher very famously wrote, "Capitalist realism, is there no alternative?" And in the book, he talks very much precisely about that fact that capitalism is the only system we're allowed to think of, that there are no other possibilities. And capitalist realism is the idea that reality is basically capitalist, therefore. And we're kind of stuck with that mode of thinking. And he talks particularly about co-optation. So the idea that capitalism overtakes, well, basically co-opts, but basically dominates and uses any alternative proposition. So artists, musicians, politicians who make kind of left-wing statements end up seeing those statements become commoditized, become commodities, become commercialized. And the irony here is that Mark Fisher has become a meme since he died in 2017. And I mean, if you Google Mark Fisher memes, you'll just see that there's this crazy amount of memes, mostly diffused through Instagram now. And the thing is that, you know, once you're a meme as a theorist, you kind of become part of the data economy. So where he talks about the risk of left-wing symbols and theories becoming commoditized, he himself has become a kind of meme commodity. So we can see, here's a very basic meme here. I won't really explain it. I mean, maybe the sentiment here is kind of okay. It's saying there's something wrong in this society where the anti-capitalist book costs, you know, X many times more than the, you know, McDonald's hamburger. Here's another one. So you actually have, because capitalism has become such a symbol, you actually have this kind of joke that Bernie Sanders is having capitalist realism tattooed on his arm. But, you know, the interesting thing is that there's kind of a silliness, there's kind of a perversity about these memes, that there's so many of them that we very much lose the meaning of Mark Fisher's work. So once you throw out so many kind of left-wing theory memes, you get into a situation where the theory no longer sticks. So it's capitalism in a way doing a very good job of trivializing left-wing culture. So I think we get into a position again of thinking, where there really is no way of expressing ourselves sensibly. So we're left maybe with abstraction, which is what I propose in the book I showed you a minute ago, this the memeing of Mark Fisher, revisiting Adorno and Walter Benjamin, that maybe we need to slow down internet consumption and free ourselves from the memes by using the internet to make a more reflective type of cultural production. So I've said all kinds of things here, but I think these slides would be a bit too much. Let's just go through the problem, basically. So I think the internet, it trivializes things. So here's this one example. When I saw this news story, which I found kind of funny, in the New York Post. So there was this news story, it was last September, it was coming up to the American election, and it basically says Osama bin Laden's niece says only Trump can prevent 9/11. And you see Osama bin Laden's niece there with a Make America Great Again Trump hat. So, you know, kind of a bizarre headline. So I took this image and I put it into Instagram in Instagram stories, you know, the kind of the temporary images you can put up there that only last a day. Instagram stories, at least on my Android phone, has this function that when you put something in, you can see it happening here. It kind of sometimes seizes on part of your image and it suggests you things you can buy. So you see this happening where this woman has a Trump doll. She's holding this doll of Trump. And I put that in my stories at one point, and it selected that and it says you might want to buy these things. And it's nothing, they're nothing to do with the Trump doll. So very often when this happens, you get Instagram algorithms trying to sell you something you really don't want. That isn't even related to the image you're putting up there. But on this one occasion that I posted this,
this MAGA hat and this story of the Bin Laden's niece who supports Trump, I actually got the algorithm identifying the hat correctly and trying to sell me a MAGA hat. So this thing of me posting this, you know, me being obviously left wing, the algorithm can't not know I'm left wing by now and anti-Trump, but the algorithm actually tried to sell me the Trump hat. So kind of funny. So why does this happen? Well, basically this happens because the internet is not trying to give you what you want. It's trying to make you click. So the second line down here, second sentence is where it says this. The internet is not about giving you what you want. It's about making you click to produce more data and capital. So the internet is kind of useless for trying to make coherent arguments and trying to forge, shall we say, a class consciousness. I mean, it has its benefits, but at the moment, what we're dealing with is kind of a frustration of our aims to spread left-wing messages, or to spread, you know, meaningful left-wing dialogue. And I think that's not really going to change. And I think it's partly deliberate, actually. And I think it's why we find the right wing kind of succeeding so well in using memes, because we're dealing with a right wing medium, basically, a neoliberal medium, not a far right medium, but neoliberals use the far right very well to try and just kind of to convince people there is an alternative, but it's just this alternative which is suppressing the left and allowing the you know, economic right wing to carry on doing their thing. So what do we do about this? Adorno and Horkheimer identified a similar thing in the Dialectic of Enlightenment back in the 1940s, when they were both in exile in America. And they basically said you have this situation where Americans think that they have a lot of choice because they can choose between 10 different films in the cinema, for example, back then, but they were all saying much the same thing. Or they had, you know, if you were a man, you had 5 different men's magazines telling you how to be a man, but they were all pushing a similar idea of masculinity, which was tied to capitalism. So we had a similar thing, or a kind of a perversion of the idea of freedom through capitalism, which today I think is something, you know, we're seeing to a much greater degree, but in a slightly different way. Okay, so that's basically, I kind of went through this at the very beginning because I went on a tangent, but that's basically how we get to the idea of autonomy via abstraction, because we have this culture which pushes all these choices, but they're actually false choices. And the only way to really get away from these false choices is to present something that stands completely outside the kind of economic order or the culture industry, as Adorno called it. So that's where you get Adorno talking about Schomburg, Mahler, Kafka, I spelt wrong, Kafka, Samuel Beckett, the playwright. So these dark kind of literary, musical and theatrical figures. And then you may ask, well, you know, what these seem to be super bourgeois figures, and actually they are. And Adorno has this kind of problem being, you know, being that he is very bourgeois, and he always tends to put forward these very bourgeois artists, but really what he's picking up on in these artists is this kind of dark abstraction, which is to a degree nonsensical and resists the kind of the false sense of capitalism, which we see in the culture industry of his time. So I actually think we need to kind of recover abstraction on the internet, not only abstraction, but I think we need to slow down the internet, basically. And I think the way around, you know, the problems we have with the internet is to use it, because it is, I say, both the best and worst thing that's ever happened to us. The internet is fantastic, and it really gives us opportunities to spread the word as left-wing creative people. But you know, obviously, it has its major faults. But we need to basically slow down our usage of it, make memes that can be, you know, thought about, and you know, there are things like this happening. There are a lot of discussion groups on YouTube. There are memes with texts, you know, small bits of text, which people then, I guess, think about, hopefully. There are reading groups. Bernie Sanders and Corbyn use the internet very well, or their campaign teams. They actually had a system whereby they had this kind of platform which campaigners would go on, and the platform would say something like, today, make sure you phone a friend and talk about
the election, make a meme about the major issues and go campaigning on the streets. And I think this is important because we could potentially make platforms not related to election campaigns, but kind of pan-European or global activist platforms where we could say, right, we need a protest in Serbia today, Belgrade, we need a protest in London, we need people to go and speak to elderly people in Helsinki, and you can plan all these things and say we also need more podcasts about the housing situation in Paris or whatever. So there are potential uses of the internet. But I think what we need actually, I think we need to be pragmatic and we need to mix things up a bit. We need that kind of approach, which is completely not Adornian, because Adorno didn't even really believe in protest. But we need a kind of approach where we're directing protests through the internet, and we need an approach where we're exploring a bit more abstraction as well, and potentials for slowing down our consumption of the internet and making images which maybe lead us away from the fundamentally capitalist nature of online culture today. So I could go on for ages and then talk about what Benjamin would say, but I'm not going to, because I think I kind of spoke for 20 minutes nearly, and I said quite a lot. And I think people are probably going to have objections and questions. So if anyone has any questions, I will be happy to answer.
So thank you, Mike. So you're, I mean, it was, you tackled so many things actually, and you emphasize the importance of internet and also the usage of internet in and also how we can use the abstraction probably in spreading this message, as I understood well, or generally how we can use again the abstraction maybe as an artist to maybe to speak or to maybe spread another message. Or do you think that abstraction is also vivid for the artists today who are, for example, creating some artistic practices and addressing them through internet, because internet is very important tool for artists to spread their ideas, their materials, and so on. And the question, we have one question also, I will collect it, and this is like this negative attitude toward the corporative media, such as social media, such as Facebook and Instagram. The question from Sibylle Hofter, she asks, like, why the open source movement didn't develop the social media platform or app, which works on other algorithms than the capitalist platforms, commercial platforms such as Facebook and so on. So this is a general question. So we have like two, maybe you can elaborate in two ways, like how you think this abstraction in the practical artistic work, and how you think that we can really use it like for our purpose if it is like basically defined by the capitalist algorithm.
Yeah, okay. Well, abstraction, I mean, I have to firstly say that the most recent wave of abstraction in contemporary art that we saw was highly commercial. You had these kind of forms like zombie, formalism, crapstraction, I don't know, there were all these kind of trendy names, but abstraction got very big in art fairs like Frieze Art Fair, and it was pushed a lot by the major art magazines. So it was highly commercialized. And I think, you know, abstract works can sell, of course, because they're very simple to understand in a way. Although, you know, also, you know, sometimes they confuse people, but there's things you can put on your wall in your house and collectors like them and whatever. Is a very simple concept, okay, for the collector or for someone who wants a painting, I guess. So, you know, I won't say that abstraction has naturally all the answers. I think it's more of an issue of, okay, how Adorno sees things. So let's just actually do a little lesson on Adorno, but I'll keep it very brief. But Adorno basically says that, again, the problem with humanity as such is that we tend to proceed by trying to control things around us. So we try and control, first of all, nature. So we're all fundamentally scared of nature, and it's nature that will kill us in the end. Okay, we're all going to die because of nature. We're all mortal. So Adorno says that, you know, that fear leads us to try and categorize things originally through magic ritual, through myths, through religion, etc. But now through science, through measurements, through economic measures, and he says that the only way to kind of escape this false kind of control we try and have over nature, which actually leads us to end up controlling the whole of humanity under capitalist conditions. He says the only way we can get through this is by somehow doing the opposite of the normal problem we're trying to control. So we need to employ a kind of a non-controlling mode of thinking. So he says that, okay, imagine you're looking at an abstract artwork, but he talks about painting, he talks about music more, but let's think you're looking at a Mark Rothko painting, for example, a large color fill painting in the museum. And as you're looking, you stop thinking about your surroundings, okay? Or let's think about music as well. So you're listening to Pink Floyd, trance music, Gustav Mahler, you know, something of this nature. And as you're listening, you get lost, okay? You're no longer thinking about doing your shopping. You're no longer thinking about your partner. You're no longer thinking about going to work tomorrow. You're no longer thinking about you and the room you're in. So we've all had that experience, maybe on drugs, maybe not on drugs, you know, however you do it. But it's in that moment of loss, Adorno says, that's when we realize the true conditions, when you're no longer differentiating between yourself and the things around you and the people around you. So he says abstraction is useful for this reason, that we momentarily lose our false boundaries. So that's where abstraction would be useful. And I think that that's really not what we're doing at all generally with work on the internet or the way we consume the internet. The internet is forcing us very much into a constant kind of identification of the other. So I would say the point is the necessity comes from the way the internet is really imposing, you know, even more on us this need to distinguish between ourselves and the rest of the world, and it's making us ill by doing it. So we need to get around this somehow. So I would say that there is a necessity, is what I would say. So the other thing is platforms. What platforms do we use? Well, I think no doubt there are other platforms, and there certainly are alternative platforms, but they all basically link in one way or the other to like the internet giants, the Facebook, Google, etc., the data giants. It's very hard to get around that unless you make your own server. I think more the problem is the thing we need to do is to just use the internet better that we have. I think certainly there are needs to develop new tech platforms, but I think we could simply try using the ones we've got, but use them better for the moment. Because I just think once you get into this, can we use a different tech? The forces mounted against us are just so huge that they're always one step ahead. Like we thought back in 1998 that the internet would make a revolution. Who didn't think that? Who's like over 40? And the internet's just ended up controlling us more than ever. So I don't think we're really going to achieve this so much necessarily by new platforms. I think we're just going to have to reprogram ourselves to use the current ones in a different way.
Oh, thank you very much. Very interesting. This especially for abstraction. It's very interesting what you have been point out. So there are some questions coming up somehow, but before that, I think maybe it is interesting to open the floor maybe for our guests and participants of the talk to maybe say something, to switch on their camera, and if they have a short question or comment, just like for 1 minute or 30 seconds, and to pose it to Rade, Katya, and Mike. I don't want to draw any conclusion, just to remind, because some people joined later, just to remind what have been said, what was emphasized. Rade was talking about the ideology of artistic autonomy, and that it helps actually the reproduction of the art as commodity in capitalist system. he was explaining how it works and where is the place of the institution of art in this context. Then Katya was emphasizing that you cannot talk about the autonomy of art or autonomy in general if you don't mention and if you don't connect it with the economy and economical relations. So I think this was a very important intervention, and we have been also mentioning the way the Artist Association, Fine Artist Association of Fine Artists Serbia is operating at the moment, and what is our idea to change it in the future. And Mike was talking about some potentials of memeing in the context of internet culture, and how maybe we can rethink the abstraction in the sense, in the Adornian sense. And he also mentioned that generally we can't rely on internet so much as it is, because it serves very much to neoliberal kind of machinery which is behind algorithms and click economy. And I'm now collecting some questions, but to Natalie Pavleska says, posed the questions to Rade Pantić, or anybody else who could answer. What do you think about the recent trend of the big corporative capital companies like banks, for example, that select and exhibit artworks in the co-partnership with public institutions under the label recognition of marginalized societies and excluded art? Does the art also enters the corporative dimension of the market exchange? This is the question.
Okay. I can answer it. Its answer is written in the question. Yes, of course, you know. These banks are collecting these artworks, and they think that they have some cut in taxes for buying arts, and they build their collection, build their financial capital, and they do it in a socially responsive way. So now, yeah, they're doing some humanitarian job. Supposedly recognizing marginal society, excluded art, excluded culture, victimized identities, and etc. And the effect of that is enlargement of this financial capital, and of course, art enters in that corporate dimension and in the market exchange as this kind of financial capital.
Yes. Thank you, Rade. I will now, if somebody wants to deliver a comment also via video and to speak, I will, Bojana Videkanić asked me to unmute her and to let her comment. Bojana?
We can unmute ourselves, you realize that?
Yes, we can.
Right. So thank you, Rade and Katya, for your extremely precise and to the point analysis of artistic autonomy. I really appreciate it. I fully agree. I do have a question for all three of you or whoever wants to address it, that when we talk about art, we often talk about, and this is related to the autonomy, we talk about professional art. I'm very interested in who is an artist, who gets to be called an artist, and why. And I think you've kind of answered some of that. And I'm very interested in other forms of art that Western, especially Frankfurt School, has not recognized as art, that has existed parallel to their work, but because they're so Eurocentric, did not recognize it. So I'm interested in, I guess, the question of who gets to create culture, whose culture is valued, and what culture is stays on for posterity. And I think Bill Rosenberry is also sort of in one of his earlier comments chatted on this or talked about this.
Thank you, Bojana. Bill Rosenberry says also, can someone speak to artists unionizing and how that promotes a sense of autonomy? Maybe I can answer briefly that at the exhibition and at the project, which goes beyond this question of artistic autonomy. We spoke also about political autonomy and about the autonomy of the artist union and artist association in relation to Serbian society, because there is a certain, let's say, a culture of censorship which is going on in Serbian society. And this is a special context in which we have here in Serbia because of the authoritarian government. So in that sense, autonomy was taught on another level, which is, I mean, autonomy is not only taught as artistic, aesthetic autonomy. But I'm now referring to the whole project, not to this particular panel. And maybe if Katya or Rade want to answer or to comment Bojana's question.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in. That I think that part of who is an artist and how this is defined is part of the problem of the Western discourse about art, right? I think that I really always like to stress that what we consider art is a very historic thing. It started at one point, it's not a universal thing. Lascaux caves are art because the Western society decided to define it as art, and so on and so on. So I think it's also a question of disciplinary definitions of what is art. And in that context, I think we also get the question of who and what is an artist, and it poses a problem. So I think it's mixed. And I think that for me, when I try to think about exploitation of labor in the arts, it then becomes important that artists are defined as workers, or that they recognize that they do work, rather than to define who is an artist, because I think you are right. And I mean, I personally believe that all labor is creative. And so in that sense, I don't need the definition of artist in some ideal world. But in this reality, I need to define these terms. So I think that defining artists as workers rather than these exceptional, talented people, who they are, as is any other profession. I don't know, from the teachers to doctors and so on and so on. So every profession.
We lost your mic a bit. Huh?
Is it better now?
It's okay, yes. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm trying to say that artists are professionals, right, to a certain extent. And that's why we talk about autonomous sphere. That's why we have artist associations, because they define certain professional parameters. And in that sense, I think that the definition of artist is interesting, and who is included and who is excluded is another question than what I'm interested in when I talk about the exploitation. So, but I agree with you that there's a lot of activities which are not considered art, but this has to do with the aesthetic discourse of Western art, rather than those artists not being artists. That's how I see it. And to answer the artist unionizing and how that promotes a sense of autonomy, I actually honestly think, by my experience, that when we stop talking about exploitation in the arts on an individual level, and when we can have public, open discussion about this exploitation, it is not only going to help us unionize and fight for better working condition in the arts, but it's also going to give us a sense of a community that is not going to be exploited. So, and in that sense, yes, it's going to be, like Vladan said earlier, right? The ULUS, or the Association of Artists, is also a kind of community. And in that sense, it's also then certain positions and certain definitions of who members of this association are then also building a strength in some kind of autonomy. And it gives you the power. It's empowering, I think, to unionize in this way. And then I think the sense of autonomy also comes because then if you can talk about art practice as and also their economic relations, then you also can talk about a certain kind of autonomy, because Rade earlier said that we need to redefine these economic conditions. And so that gives us the autonomy to define these working conditions, to define the economic relations. So maybe that's my 5 cents.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think we managed to clarify some things quite well. Bill Roseberry says, thank you. More questions, more comments. If you want to pose the question, you can use the chat, or if you want to speak, you can raise the hand. Someone, we have 32 participants, and I hope somebody will have some comment or some question. Maybe someone from the Artist Association, the Association of the Fine Artists of Serbia, who wants to tell something about their achievements and what is on stake right now. Wahida?
You should unmute people.
Yes, but people have to ask for question. I cannot unmute everyone. Mm-hmm. Yes, I will unmute you.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, so yeah, of course, there is lots of questions, and for me, it's maybe important also from which perspective are we talking, like of, or better to say, like not what actually, like I would say, like what actually we think our social and political perspective is, you know, like, and what, when we are talking about autonomy, of arts, and what is the, like, a purpose of autonomy of arts and function, and and in the condition of this, what the role of art could be in this, you know, like social and political perspective. What do we think? Because of course we know, like, we are not living in a, like, we are living in a world that is extremely changing, you know, and it's a very uncertain what's, like, we're talking about the end of capitalism, about the, like, not like the, kako se kaže, skrivanje, like, hiding the possibility of the end of capitalism, you know, like, this is what we are concerned really about, like what the could be the progressive role of arts in the society for the, you know, like, for the restructuring, like the social political restructuring. And how to say, you know, like, when we are talking about the art, we are very conscious in Serbia. We have very special heritage. Our association is inheriting this model of independent artists, which was like very unique as an independent worker, also tied with the society, with certain benefits on thanks to the like its function in the society, like social benefits, but also tied with the society, and so with a certain autonomy, and in the way also tied. So it's not only the question of being autonomous, but also the question of being tied, and tied in which way with the society. But of course, and nowadays we can't use this model in the country of peripheral social capitalism, such as Serbia. So this is something interesting, maybe more interesting for other countries, which nowadays have more social mechanisms, instruments. While here in Serbia, in like such peripheral countries, all our instruments are completely destroyed for social activities. Also, nowadays, our association is facing lots of attacks from very different sides, and and then we think, yeah, of course, like they, the government, or I don't know, they recognize that art is powerful, and that we, even if we are not supported by the artist union association, by the government or so, or are not paid, that they fear us. So they really, we are in a kind of a constant struggle since we came to took these positions in the Association of Fine Artists, and rejecting, how to say, Vladan, help me, odbacujući lateralne udare I tako dalje.
To reject strikes which are coming from the start.
Yeah, from all
all
different sides and infiltrations and so on. So we understand that we concentrate certain a power as a a class, which but not artists mainly don't recognize it, how they see themselves. They see mostly they see themselves now as Katya was explaining well, and it was well explained, so I don't want to repeat it, as they deserve privileges and so on, but so artists are it's very difficult to think that artists could be part of the working, proletariat, because the natural, born, where the as the artists as professionals belong to the middle class. Another thing is that they are impoverished now, and that they are now crying for their lost privileges, but this doesn't make them closer to the workers. They are not they're not exploiting less. Their way of production is still the question is actually how to produce, how to create a different working production relations which will not be exploitative, I think, because we as artists could think about this. We can, we don't want to exploit, we don't want to be exploited, or I don't know, or you have all sorts of artists, all, as Rade was saying, also how artists are I would interpret now very simplify, how they're also exploited, and but also exploiting, depends in which place you are like positioned.
Okay, Vahida, thank you very much.
Okay.
I think you tried to briefly to give the to describe the situation, particular situation in which we are, and I mean this can be also probably discussed in some other discussions that we will have, especially because our idea is to talk more and to organize, to talk more in the context of organizing and how we can maybe organize with some social movements or with some social other social actors in the society, which I think it is very important. And of course, the autonomy of a certain techne of art exists in that sense, but the social, political, and economical autonomy of the artist in the society is hardly to achieve, and it becomes some kind of ideological balloon, which is practically stopping artists to organize as a workers with other workers. So this is basically what we try to think and how to structure all this in that sense. And Bill Roseberry, very active in chat, and I thank very much for this, says that he personally recommends Katya's highly informative book, Artwork, to all present. We have mentioned Katya's book, and we have mentioned also the book of Mike, and the last book that Rade Pantić published. I think that all three are very relevant for the members of our association, and I think this would be very good for them to find out and to see what you have been written, and to try also to think all these questions what we have posed and what we have opened this evening, but also some answers that we gave. So if there is somebody else except Vahida and maybe somebody from the public that joined, I noticed that some people joined very late, like Galit. I noticed that she joined quite late, and Miloš Zec, never mind, but they can maybe follow everything later on YouTube channel, because it can be it will be archived. So Katya, do you want to say something, to add something? I thought that I saw you.
I just wanted to, if anybody know, I saw Rade nodding, and I don't know if other two wanted to add something to Vahida's comments. I think it's also a question of when we think about art, we try to think, I think this common cultural perception is that it's something universal, and then also artist becomes this special creature almost like. And in that sense, I also think that what we forget is that artists come from different social classes. So I'm gonna come back to the question, to that example of Jens Hanning and his painting that he did for that museum. When I contacted all these people, there are some artists there who earn a lot of money, and we all know, and they're always used as an exception, right, to the rule. Oh my, artists can earn a lot of money. But of course, Greg Cholet gave us a great metaphor of dark matter, of that from that dark matter, where these 1%ers come out who have a lot of money, and the majority gives up on the way. So I think that it's also important to think about artists not in this homogenizing, or the way that every artist is the same, because that is not true. And I think that for us, or for a lot of us here and this chat that come from this broken a country that was socialist Yugoslavia, it's also that we have a different sense of art as labor, of different kinds of the ways that art was, to a certain extent, in socialist Yugoslavia, accessible to many people. It was not necessarily, and not always, a question of having rich parents to become an artist. And so I think that this is partially important to recognize, but today these distinctions are getting larger and bigger, and we know that it is, especially in the West where I teach, in US, it is extremely hard to be an artist. There's a very great collective, BFA, MFA, PhD. They made a really great how to say, research about how many artists after art school actually practice their profession for payment. And the numbers were miserable. I can't cite them now. I can put it in the chat link so you can check their work. This was a few years ago. So we need to recognize that artists come from different classes, and that when we want to talk about exploitation of labor, it is precisely, I think, through, for me, it's a socialist ideal, because I would like that people who want to practice art to be able to practice art, because it's going to be paid until the capitalism is over. In the meantime.
Thank you. Very nice. So, yes, I have posted YouTube link in the chat. So for the people who came later in the discussion, they can watch everything. So thanks. People say thanks in the chat. So maybe we can unmute everyone and slowly clap the hands and finish the talk. I think we have been exploring many issues, and I think it is coming to an end. And Milica Pekic says, thank you all for nice discussion. Maybe Ulus can unmute everyone, and we can just clap our hands and thank to all speakers.
Clapping already.
We did already, yeah. Thank you.
Great panel.
Great.
Thank
you. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Yeah, I hope to see you in person and very soon. So this is my wish.
My wish too. Next time, not on Zoom, in person. Bye bye.
Next time in Brazil.
In Napoli.
In Napoli, yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Katya.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you,
Cheers.
Vladan, for organizing.
Thank you, Maria, for being behind the Zoom and recording everything.
Thank you all. I was enjoying behind. Thank you.
Thanks.